My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 26 years old. For most of my life, I believed something simple. Something almost naive that no matter how difficult things got, no matter how lost I felt in the world, my family would always be there. That they would be my safe place. The one place where I didn't have to prove anything, didn't have to fight to belong. But the truth is, sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who quietly decide, you were never meant to belong at all. It was my birthday that night. A small, intimate gathering at home, just family, just familiar faces pretending everything was normal. The house smelled like vanilla frosting and warm candles, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe this night might actually be different. My mother moved around the kitchen, forcing a smile that never quite reached her eyes. My father sat in his usual chair, distant as ever, hiding behind silence like it was a shield. And my brother, he stood at the center of it all, laughing, talking, owning the room like he always did. I didn't question it when he suddenly asked to make a toast. It wasn't like him, but I thought maybe he was trying to be kind for once. Everyone gathered. Glasses raised, quiet smiles forming across their faces. I held mine a little tighter, a strange unease settling in my chest that I couldn't explain. Then he looked at me, directly at me, and in that moment, something inside me shifted. His smile wasn't warm. It wasn't loving. It was cold, almost rehearsed. "Let's raise a toast," he said smoothly. "To my sister." He paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to pull everyone in. Just long enough to make my heart beat faster. Then he finished it, and the words didn't land gently. They cut straight through me. To the one person who has managed to embarrass this family more than anyone else. A few awkward laughs echoed through the room. Uncertain and hesitant, like people weren't sure if they were supposed to find it funny. I didn't laugh. I couldn't, because I saw his eyes, and there was nothing playful in them. Only truth. Cold, deliberate truth. My chest tightened as the air in the room seemed to shift, the warmth disappearing in an instant. My mother tried to interrupt, her voice tense, telling him not to ruin the moment, but he didn't even look at her. Instead, he stepped closer to me, closing the space between us like he wanted to make sure I felt every word he was. About to say "dot," and then he said it, slowly, clearly, so there was no escaping it. "You should stop calling yourself one of us." The silence that followed was suffocating. It wrapped around me, pressed into my lungs, made it hard to breathe. I looked around instinctively, searching for anyone to react, to say something, to tell him he had gone too far. But no one did. My mother looked down. My father didn't move. The rest of them avoided my eyes like I had suddenly become something they couldn't face. And in that moment, I understood something far worse than his words. They agreed with him. My voice came out small, fragile, barely holding together as I asked him what he meant. Even though part of me already knew, he didn't hesitate. He told me I'd been pretending all these years, pretending to belong to a family that never truly accepted me. That word, pretending, echoed in my mind, tearing through every memory I had of trying to be enough, trying harder, staying quieter, giving more. And still, it was never enough. I told him it was my birthday, as if that still meant something, as if it would remind him to stop. But he just shrugged, like it didn't matter at all. Like this was the perfect moment to say it. The truth. He called it. My fingers went numb, and before I even realized it, the glass slipped from my hand and shattered against the floor. The sound was sharp, sudden, final. But even that didn't break the silence. No one moved. No one came to me. No one told him to stop. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just his cruelty. It was everyone's. The tears burned in my eyes, but I forced them back. I refused to cry in front of them. I refused to let them see me fall apart. So I nodded slowly, even though everything inside me was breaking. "Okay," I said quietly, a single word that carried more pain than anything else I could have said. Then I turned and walked away. No one called my name. No one followed me. The door closed behind me with a soft sound, but to me, it felt louder than anything I had ever heard. Because in that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it changed completely. And as I stepped out into the cold night air, one thought settled deep inside my chest. Stronger than the pain, stronger than the humiliation. They thought I didn't belong. They thought I was nothing. But one day, I would make them regret ever saying it. The cold air hit my face the moment I stepped outside, but it wasn't enough to numb what was happening inside me. My hands were shaking, my chest tight, like I had been holding my breath for too long and didn't know how to let it go. I stood there for a moment, right outside the house I had called home my entire life, staring at the door like it might open. Like someone might come running after me, call my name, tell me it wasn't true. No one came. Of course they didn't. I let out a slow breath, one that felt heavier than it should have, and started walking. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to move. Needed to put distance between me and that room, those faces. Those words that kept echoing in my head like they were carved into me. You should stop calling yourself one of us. Each step felt heavier than the last. My heels clicked against the pavement, the sound sharp in the quiet night, almost mocking me. I wrapped my arms around myself, not because I was cold, but because I felt exposed. Stripped of something I didn't even realize. I had been holding on to all these years. Belonging. I reached the end of the street and stopped. My breath uneven, my vision slightly blurred. That's when it hit me. Not the words, not the humiliation, but the truth behind it. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't just one moment of cruelty. It had always been there. I just chose not to see it. The way my brother was always praised. No matter what he did. The way my mistakes were never just mistakes. They were proof that I wasn't enough. The way my parents looked at me, not with anger, not even with disappointment, but with something worse. Indifference. I swallowed hard. The realization settling deep, heavy, permanent. I was never one of them. Not really. My phone buzzed in my hand, pulling me out of my thoughts. I looked down, my heart tightening for a second, just a second, hoping it might be my mother. Or even my father. It wasn't. It was a message from my brother. Of course it was. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it, my fingers slightly trembling despite everything inside me telling me not to. You needed to hear it. Stop embarrassing us. That was it. No apology. No hesitation. Just cold, casual cruelty. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like a thread finally breaking after being pulled too tight for too long. I didn't cry. That was the strange part. I expected tears. I expected pain to spill out of me in ways I couldn't control. But instead, there was nothing, just a calm, heavy emptiness, and underneath it, something else. Something sharper. I looked back at the house one last time. The windows glowing warmly, laughter faintly echoing from inside like nothing had happened. Like I had never been part of it in the first place. That's when I understood. They'd already moved on. So why shouldn't I? I unlocked my phone again, opened my brother's message, and stared at those words one more time. Then slowly, deliberately, I deleted the conversation. Not out of weakness, but out of decision. Because I was done holding on to people who had already let go of me. I took a deep breath. This time steady, controlled. And for the first time that night, I thought clearly, if I didn't belong to them, then I didn't owe them anything. Not my time, not my effort, not my silence. A small, almost invisible smile touched my lips, not from happiness, but from realization. They thought they had broken me. They thought this was the end of my place in their world, but they were wrong. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Because if they wanted me out of their family, then I would give them exactly what they asked for, but not the way they expected. I turned away from the house completely this time and started walking again. My steps slower, steadier, more certain. The pain was still there, sitting deep in my chest, but it no longer controlled me. Now, it was fuel. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about how to belong. I was thinking about how to rise, and more importantly, how to make them regret ever making me feel like I didn't. The next morning didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a continuation of something unfinished, something heavy that had followed me into sleep and refused to let go. I woke up in my small apartment, the silence around me unfamiliar in a way it had never been before. For years, I'd been surrounded by noise, family voices, expectations, constant reminders of who I was supposed to be. But now there was nothing. Just me, just the quiet. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel lonely. It felt honest. I sat up slowly, staring at the blank wall in front of me, replaying everything from the night before. His voice. Their silence. That sentence. Over and over again, like my mind was trying to make sense of something it already understood too well. I got out of bed and walked toward the mirror. Stopping a moment, I saw my reflection. My eyes were tired, slightly swollen, but there were no tears left. Just something deeper. Something steadier. I studied my face for a long moment, as if I was seeing myself clearly for the first time, not as the version my family had always defined. Not as the one who was never enough, but as someone separate from all of that. Someone who had spent years shrinking to fit into a space that was never meant for her. And that's when the realization settled in, quiet but powerful. If I had spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I didn't have any, then maybe the problem was never me. Maybe it was the fact that I kept trying to earn a place that was never going to be given. I picked up my phone, half expecting to see messages, maybe regret, maybe guilt, maybe something. But there was nothing. No missed calls. No apologies. No one checking if I was okay. Just silence. The kind of silence that confirms everything you've been trying to deny. I placed the phone back down, slower this time, more deliberate. That was the moment something inside me shifted completely. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. Cold, undeniable clarity. They didn't just hurt me, they dismissed me. Erased me like I never mattered. And people who can do that don't deserve access to you. Not your time. Not your presence. Not your future. I walked over to my desk, pulling open the drawer where I kept old documents, papers I hadn't looked at in years. My fingers moved through them slowly until I found what I was looking for, my job offer letter. The one I had turned down months ago because my family didn't approve. Because they said it was too far, too risky, not stable enough. I stared at the paper, a bitter smile forming on my lips. I had given up opportunities. For them, adjusted my life. For them, and in return, they gave me rejection. Not even quietly, publicly, cruelly. That thought didn't hurt anymore. It sharpened me. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up the email I had once been too afraid to reply to. The offer was still there. The company was still hiring. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a second, not out of doubt, but out of awareness. This moment mattered. This decision would change everything. And then, without overthinking it, without letting fear creep back in, I started typing, calm, direct, confident. I accepted the offer. One chose myself. As soon as I hit send, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. Not a shaky breath like the night before. A steady one. A controlled one. For the first time, it felt like I was moving forward instead of standing still, waiting for someone else to decide my worth. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a job. This was the first step in something bigger. Something they would never see coming. Because while they were busy deciding I didn't belong, I was quietly building a life where I wouldn't need them at all, and maybe, just maybe, one day they would see exactly what they lost. Not because I told them, not because I tried to prove it, but because my absence would say everything they refused to hear. The call came 3 days later, I was sitting at my desk, halfway through reorganizing my entire life into neat, controlled pieces when my phone lit up with an unknown number. For a moment, I just stared at it, my fingers hovering above the screen. Something in my chest tightened, not fear, not exactly. Just instinct. The kind that tells you. "This matters," I answered. "Hello?" There was a brief pause on the other end, like the person speaking wasn't sure where to begin. Then I heard her voice stop my mother. "Emily?" Just my name. Soft, careful, like nothing had happened. I closed my eyes for a second, studying myself. 3 days. 3 days of silence, and now this. Not an apology. Not urgency, just hesitation. "Yes," I replied, my tone calm, almost distant. "What is it?" Another pause. Longer this time. We noticed you left early on your birthday," she said, her voice tight, like she was choosing each word carefully. "You didn't come back." I let out a quiet breath, not out of frustration, but disbelief. That's what she chose to say. Not why I left. Not what happened. Just the fact that I didn't return. I didn't feel like staying, I said simply. Silence again. Then a slight shift in her tone. "Your brother didn't mean it the way it sounded," she added quickly. "He was just being honest. You know how he is." Honest? That word again. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, letting her words settle not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything I already knew. "You're right," I said quietly. "I do know how he is." She seemed relieved, like she thought I understood. Like she thought I was about to forgive, to move on, to return to the same place I had finally walked away from. But I wasn't. "And I also know how you are." I continued, my voice steady, controlled. "You heard everything he said. You watched it happen. And you didn't stop him." That hit something. I could hear it in her breathing. The slight tension, the discomfort she couldn't hide. "Emily." It wasn't the right moment to. There was no right moment. I cut in, still calm, still composed. There was just a moment. And you chose to stay silent. She didn't respond this time, because there was nothing she could say. The truth doesn't leave much room for excuses. I didn't call to argue. She finally said, her voice softer now, almost defensive. "I just wanted to make sure you're not overreacting." Overreacting. For a second. The old version of me, the one who doubted herself, who questioned her own feelings, almost responded, but that version of me was gone. "I'm not overreacting," I said. "I'm just finally reacting." The silence that followed felt different this time. Heavier, real. "I've accepted a job," I added, my tone neutral. "I'll be moving." That caught her off guard. "What? When? Where?" "Soon," I replied. "Details aren't important." "They are important," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "You can't just leave without discussing it with us." "US. That word didn't mean what it used to." "I can," I said simply. "And I already have." Another pause. This one sharper. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice firm now, slipping back into something familiar control. "Running away won't fix anything." I smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. "I'm not running away," I said. "I'm walking away." "There's a difference." She didn't like that dot. I could feel it. "You're still part of this family." "Emily," she said, almost as if she was reminding herself more than me. For a moment, I said nothing. Then, slowly, I answered. "That's not what he said." The line went quiet, completely quiet, and in that silence, everything was understood. "I have to go," I said, not waiting for a response this time, and before she could say anything else, I ended the call. Just like that, no anger, no raised voice, no tears, just a decision. I placed the phone down gently and sat there for a moment, letting the quiet fill the room again. But this time, it didn't feel heavy, it felt right, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix something that was never mine to fix. I wasn't trying to hold on to people who had already let go of me. I was choosing myself. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning, because while they were still holding on to the past, I was already building a future they would never be part of. The move happened faster than I expected, almost like once I made the decision, everything else just fell into place. Within 2 weeks, my apartment was packed into boxes, my old life reduced to labeled corners and sealed memories. I didn't tell anyone the exact day I was leaving. Not my parents. Not my brother. There was nothing left to explain. Nothing left worth sharing. The morning I left, the city looked the same as it always had, busy, familiar, indifferent, but I felt completely different walking through it. Lighter, but not in a happy way. More like I had finally put something down that I had been carrying for far too long. I didn't look back when the car pulled away. I didn't need to. That chapter had already ended the moment I walked out of that house on my birthday. The new city didn't welcome me with warmth or comfort. It didn't care who I was or where I came from. And strangely, that was exactly what I needed. No expectations. No comparisons. No one looking at me like I was less than something I never asked to be. My job started the very next week, and it was nothing like the life I had left behind. It was demanding, fast-paced, and unforgiving in its own way, but it was honest. Every hour I worked, every idea I contributed, every small success I achieved. It was mine, not something handed to me, not something compared to someone else. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I didn't have any. I was building it for myself. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Slowly, without even realizing it, I began to change. I spoke more confidently. I carried myself differently. The quiet girl who once stayed in the background started to disappear, replaced by someone stronger, someone sharper. I worked harder than anyone else, not out of desperation this time, but out of purpose. And people noticed. My manager noticed. My colleagues noticed. Opportunities started coming my way, ones I would have been too afraid to even consider before. Promotions, bigger projects, leadership roles. Every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I had lost somewhere along the way. And then one evening, after a long day at work, I checked my phone and saw something I hadn't expected. A message from my brother. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment, my expression unreadable. Months had passed. Months of silence. And now, this? I opened it, not with hesitation, but with curiosity. I heard about your new job. Seems like you're doing well. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he had said. Just a statement, casual, almost dismissive. But beneath it, I could feel something else. Something subtle. Something he probably didn't even realize was there. I leaned back in my chair, reading the message again, not because it mattered, but because of what it represented. This wasn't about him checking on me. This was about him noticing something had changed. That I had changed. That I had done something without them. Something they couldn't control, couldn't take credit for, couldn't dismiss. For the first time, I was no longer invisible in their world. And the irony of it all almost made me smile, but I didn't reply, not right away, because this wasn't about proving anything to him anymore. This is about understanding something deeper. The people who once made you feel like nothing will always notice when you become something. And when they do, they don't come back with apologies. They come back with curiosity. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm I had never known before. I woke up every morning with a sense of purpose, a quiet confidence that wasn't loud or showy, but it was there, solid and checkable. I was building a life I could be proud of, step by step, choice by choice. No one was dictating my worth anymore. No one was telling me who I was or wasn't. I had learned the hard way that family doesn't always mean loyalty. that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who cut you down the deepest. And maybe that's why this felt so liberating, because I had finally broken free from their judgment, their silence. And their control. Then came the opportunity I had been working toward without even realizing it, a leadership role in my company. One that put me in charge of a team, responsible for big decisions and real results. The first time I walked into that office, as the head of my own project, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the forced kind, the hollow kind that comes from approval or recognition from people who barely care, but the real kind that comes from knowing that I'd earned it all myself. And somewhere deep inside, I realized that was the real revenge, not anger, not confrontation, not proving anyone wrong. It was the success, autonomy, control over my own life. Everything they had tried to take from me had only pushed me towards something bigger. One evening, months after my birthday, I received another message from my brother. I stared at it, curious and calm. "Emily, you've done well." I didn't expect this. There was no apology, no guilt, no acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. Just recognition. And that was enough. I didn't need more. I didn't respond because I knew something he didn't. The damage he had done to me wasn't permanent. It had been a catalyst. His cruelty had pushed me to become someone I might never have been without it. I smiled quietly to myself, a small, almost imperceptible grin, because for the first time, the story wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, my growth, my rise, my life. Looking back, I realized that night at my birthday had been both an ending and a beginning. It had ended the version of me that sought validation from people who refused to give it, and it had begun the version of me that stood on her own, uncheckable and uncompromising. And though the pain of betrayal still lingered, it no longer had power over me. I turned it into strength, into motivation, into a life I could call my own. I turned humiliation into fuel. And in that, I found something no one could ever take away. My peace, my confidence, and my independence. Because the truth is, revenge isn't always about making someone pay. Sometimes it's about becoming untouchable in your own right. Sometimes it's about walking away from everything that tried to define you and building something they can't ever reach. And as I sat in my new office, looking out over the city lights, I finally understood. They had tried to erase me, to make me feel like I didn't belong, but I had belonged to myself all along. And that made all the difference.